So thank you. So it's 5 o'clock and I'd like to call the Airport Commission October to order. First on the agenda is let me get the agenda up here. Because I'm a little bit behind.
Ryan, would you like me to display the agenda on the screen?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Give me 1 second.
I'm just going to bring the materials up here also. The packet. Okay, there it is. Thank you. All right. So next, Brian, why don't you or Mark, who's going to operate for the city?
I can.
Okay.
So we have
So-
Member Hynero,
Here.
Member Shaw.
Here.
Member Lorman,
Here.
Chair Halleck.
Here.
And my understanding that Michelle Bond will be joining in a little bit, and Kevin Munson has indicated he will be absent tonight.
Okay. Yeah. So proof of posting.
Yes, the agenda was properly posted.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I'll give everybody a few minutes to take a look at the minutes.
I have a question, not about the minutes. How many members do we have, Brian?
7.
Luke is also absent.
Okay,
7.
so
Yep.
Luke, Michelle, and Kevin are absent. Okay, just checking.
So when anybody's ready to make a motion on the minutes.
I will make a motion to approve them.
Okay, motion by David to approve. Is there anyone second it?
I'll second. This is Hynero.
Okay, so I have a first and a second. Any more discussion? With that, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposing, same sign. Motion passes, minutes are approved. We're going on to reports. I don't have any reports, but I do have a couple of questions of the city. The Airport Commission has made a motion, a recommendation to the city on the land use zoning ordinance. Has anything come of that?
I can answer that question. Luke and I were going to take it to council. As you probably are aware, the council has been laser focused on the budget and the referendum. But I imagine in November, if not the first meeting, at least the second meeting, we'll be able to make a presentation to the council of that and anything else related to the Airport Commission, and ask that the council consider the exact wording of the motion, which was to explore the feasibility, cost, benefits, and implications of a land use zoning ordinance. And that would presumably kick off the process of figuring
Okay.
out how to fit that into our calendar.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to add to as an update. Everything I have is down below. So Rich, how about you? You want to provide the report? And Brian, can you pull up the reports and things as we talk about them?
Yes, just give me a second here. Go ahead, Rich. I'll get your
Well,
report.
Mr. Chair, can I say something else too?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know I'm remiss in not having followed up with Kevin and Brian Shaw about discussing some, and Rich too, for that matter. Rich was going to be our subject matter expert, but to talk about ways that we can communicate with the public about noise and noise reporting process and just start that conversation. And that too has taken a backseat because of the budget and the referendum. But I hope to turn to that and reach out to the folks in later this month to organize a time to get together and start brainstorming.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I know Kevin had made a couple of comments to me about it, and I know he's ready and willing to participate. And so you can provide the leadership, and we should be good to go there. Okay, thank you.
Very
Rich,
good. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to help facilitate that, to make it a town hall meeting type thing or a neighborhood meeting or whatever. Well, we can speak to that exactly on this neighbor relations here. So for this period, 24th of August through September 29, 5 individuals made a total of 9 overflight or noise reports. 5 of the reports came from one individual, and all of them were for twin engine aircraft, turboprop aircraft, or jets. And as best I can determine, they were flying the profile for the instrument approach, the RNAV runway 28, which puts them on the edge of the and/or over a small portion of, I believe it's Middleton Hills. All the other reports were individuals, and I addressed all reports. There was again, trying to communicate as to what is actually happening. And there is also the expectation seems to be that if someone starts complaining about something, it's going to change. And if it doesn't, they're frustrated. I can understand that expectation, but since this is essentially out of our hands, the FAA sets these approaches, they certify their safety. It's hard to communicate that. No aircraft accidents or incidents on the field. Airport maintenance, again, coordinating. We've got the location set. We're welding up brackets. And once we have the knock boxes in place, we're going to start collecting keys and/or codes. Runway and taxi lights seem to be working just fine. And there was we'll talk about that later, but there was a final walkthrough. Now, again, we're still in our 80th year of operation, and I still haven't decided if we're going to celebrate it or how we're going to celebrate it. Governor Evers flew into the Middleton Municipal Airport September 13th. I'm sure it must have been coming from somewhere else, and he must have had an appointment on the west side, but you don't often see the governor come through our place. I did say hello. Chapter 93, EA chapter, Young Eagles event on September 17th. Can't say enough about Chapter 93. They do a great job. 35 people, most of them young, a couple grandparents received ground, school, and free airplane rides. And then this Girls in Aviation event just gets better and better by the year. Again, can't say enough about the organizers. We very well attended, had to be well over 100 people there, their families, 10 learning stations. With the Army National Guard, they had helicopter pilots, 2 females there talking to the women, giving them an option, or young ladies, giving them, this is an option. Fire department had a ladder truck out. 4 aircraft were available for people to sit in to and answer. The owners were there to answer questions. Amazing what they're doing with the simulators and virtual reality. They had 2 sets, one for glider, one for powered, and then had a balloon there as well, and balloonists. So it was really an excellent event. Happy to have hosted it. I did attend the Wisconsin Aviation Management Association's convention. It's a 3-day event. I could only afford to be up there a full day with the workload that we have, but there were some very good sessions, including one by AvFuel talking about the alternatives, the GAMI and the Swift R100, and the challenges we're facing with all of that. And this weekend, there will be another Wings to Fly special Young Eagles event. And Maury Airplane Company is honored to host that as well, and I will be flying one of the participants.
Great. Thank you, Rich. Does anyone have any questions of Rich?
I just have one about the girls in, well, I guess it's a couple about girls in aviation. That sounds like a great event, Rich, and I'm just wondering, what kind of outreach do you do, or does Maury Airplane Company do to surrounding communities? Like, and do you have any information on, were these girls coming from Middleton or Verona and Fitchburg showing up? Do you get Girl Scout troops coming? I'm just curious to know how you publicize that event.
Well, this is an annual event, and the governor has proclaimed it on the date, Girls in Aviation. There were simultaneous events throughout the state, both in Milwaukee, Madison, various other places. There was publicity out on this. The organizers themselves were the ones that did the outreach. I don't believe we had it. The Girl Scouts run their own event specific with the women in aviation, so I didn't see any troops there. But to be honest, I, as a host, am not directly involved with the promotion of this. They did a very good job of it, and I would have to have you get in touch with Susan Schwab and company. Susan's a retired airline captain, and she was pretty much organizing this along with a current airline captain. So honestly, I can't answer that question effectively. I know there was a very effective outreach. I'm just not sure precisely how they went about it.
Okay, and yeah, I like if it would be appropriate and helpful, I think having the governor do a proclamation is obviously wonderful. I wonder if we could have council underscore that and have their own. So if you'd make a note for next year to give us time to get something in the works, that would be really good.
I will certainly do that, and it would be, we may have left an opportunity on the table to reach out to the local neighbors, but I do know that there were a number of young women and families from the Middleton, the West Side, and the Madison area.
Okay, Lisa, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy that, Lisa, that you're willing to step forward and help with some of the community communications. I think we've tried in the past and it didn't go well. So maybe you can have a better opportunity at it and have more success, which would be good because it does need to be done. Any questions of Rich? If not, we'll move on to the airport financial review. Okay, Brian, you want to put up the spreadsheet? Yeah, we also included something in there about the an event and comments that they had. I looked through this and I really didn't see anything that stuck out to me. It looks to me like we're pretty much on tap to what we thought we would be. We're still ahead for the year. Funds are increasing, but typically near the end of the year, they have a tendency to go down because the income's the first of the year, and then as we go through the year, it becomes less and less. So I think so far, so good. Does anybody have any questions about the airport financials? Okay, with that, let's move to the next item. There had been a couple of letters from the township to the city, or it could be townships plural. I really can't answer that question, regarding lead and airborne lead. And the city did research, and there was some communications between a couple of people that everybody wasn't available to because of open meeting laws. And I thought that everybody should have the benefit. Kevin is actually the person that did most of the research. I was just directed everybody to Kevin, and they'll let Kevin do it. He's a deep dive. I'll give you my understanding as I understand it. The town of Middleton hired an independent testing company to do testing for lead in and around the airport. One comment that was made was we would have liked to have seen more reference sites in areas outside of that residential area and the airport, maybe some over in the park, the industrial park or research park adjacent to us, and maybe some on Mineral Point, or maybe on 12 or University. So we could get a broader scope of what the area looks like rather than just the two. So that was a comment. The other comment was that we did research on there is a standard for airborne lead from the EPA. They monitor 93 sites around the country, and they set a lead standard for that. Our results are somewhere around, maybe Brian and Mark, you can fill in the gaps here, but I was believing it was almost 100th of that maximum amount for airborne lead. The chair of the town of Middleton on WKOW TV acknowledged the fact that the local readings were well below the EPA standard. The EPA standard may be behind and maybe not appropriate. I think the endangerment finding that they will do on Reed Hillview will cause probably an update in the rules and regulations. We will see what that is. I know I don't set airborne toxin standards, neither does the city or the airport. So there is something to be remained there, but we are well below that. And if you take a look at the range of the 93 sites that they measured to set the standard, we are in the best 10% of all of those based on the measurements that were taken. So that's kind of where we are with the EPA standards. And with regards to zero lead, I doubt it'll ever be a standard of zero lead. I mean, lead is a natural occurring element in the environment and the earth, so I doubt it'll be zero. There's none that I'm aware of that's probably zero, but there may be. And so that we will see what that will all done. Reed Hillview is kind of the tip of the sword for the community with lead and the FAA and the EPA. So there was a demand by the, I'll call it a demand by the Township of Middleton that we convert over today to 94 UL, which is what the Reed Hillview people did. They got rid of 100 low lead and went to 94 UL. The result of that is a lawsuit with the FAA. And the FAA, we'll see who prevails. And the penalty potentially for Reed Hillview is every dollar that they've ever received from the FAA having to be reimbursed back to the FAA because they broke their assurances. Because their assurances say that they will unprejudicially provide service, service really all aircraft capable of using the facility. That kind of a damage would be devastating to the city of Middleton. The decision for some of that is really beyond my pay grade. But that's kind of how I see it today. The question I have in my mind is what happens, if somebody says there is an endangerment. Are they going to ground 170,000 aircraft the next day and shut down every general aviation airport in the United States? I doubt that. I would like to see the government facilitating the creation of the supply chain for the new G100 UL. So if they all want to solve the problem's to get the right fuel. Everybody's waiting for the fuel, and that's the communities, that's the airports, that's the pilots, that's everybody. And the government, the EPA and the FAA, who are the rule makers, are the ones that are really going to have to solve those problems and get us what we need. So I think that's kind of a summary of what's been discussed and the facts as I know them. If anybody has any questions, you can ask. And I know Mark and Brian have developed the city's response, which I might make another comment at. The newspapers never really called a number of us. And I suggested that this is an important enough topic that individuals shouldn't be given their individual opinion. The city should come up with their position, and then the rest of us should get behind that opinion. So, comments, questions? Yes, Lisa.
First of all, thank you for that summary of the situation. And Brian and Mark, thank you for putting together this letter. It's a very good letter. I think it's a good response. As somebody who worked in the area of risk communication about radioactive waste, there are a couple things that I think if we have a continuing conversation with the towns, I think I would have done differently in this letter. The first one is I would have totally acknowledged that there is that lead in any amount poses a risk, because I know that I've heard that cited as false, and that frankly is absolutely the case. There's no known safe level of lead exposure. But John, you're right, there is no zero lead standard. Drinking water doesn't have it because we can't achieve it. Even lead-free faucet fixtures and bubblers are allowed to contain a very small amount of lead because it's just not feasible to produce those things the way we produce them now and have for decades without some sort of lead. But it's always, I think, a good idea to acknowledge that we understand why people are concerned about this instead of, making it seem through omission that we're not convinced there's a hazard, right? Because we want people to know that we understand the concern. I would have been very forceful about making a pledge to convert to the 100 UL as soon as possible. I know it says in there the city could convert its existing low-level fuel tank, and I'm sure the could was not meant to be a hedge. But again, people who are reading the letter to try to figure out what's the city going to do about this, that we're committed to converting it as soon as it's available. I would have mentioned the endangerment finding, because that is an ongoing question that we have, and it reinforces that we're on top of this and paying attention and doing our due diligence. So I certainly would have mentioned that, and that we're following it closely, and then I would have pledged to continue or engage in conversations with the town. And I believe, Brian Gatto, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe so far it's just the town of Middleton. So those are just some thoughts for future messaging, because this issue won't go away. And then I had a question about when did the shooting range close that's mentioned in the letter? because I thought that was almost a little bit of a red herring. It's a decommissioned shooting range. If it's, if the decommissioning was done properly, there should be very little lead on site, certainly not ambient lead. So I just thought that was maybe trying to make too strong a case that, or point the finger at the shooting range.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and then I'm gonna let Rich, he's got his hand up. First of all, I don't know what shooting range has to do with airborne lead.
Well,
But-
they use lead, yeah, airborne, right.
Yeah, I don't know what has to
After
do with
it's-
airborne lead.
Yeah.
What throws me is, we continually say that there's no minimum level of safe lead, but why does the EPA then have an airborne lead standard that we're 1/100th of? In my mind, I'm trying to reconcile these facts. And I really don't know how to
It's
do
a-
that.
It's a cost benefit analysis. It's just like the lead plumbing fixtures. To take them out would cost so much money that even though parents would, I think there should be truth in advertising. I don't think products that contain lead should be able to declare themselves lead-free, but that is the case with lead-free fixtures right now. But it's just not feasible on a large scale like our nation to produce lead or produce plumbing fixtures without lead. Whoever comes up with a process that can do it without adding lead to make it the metal more malleable, they're going to be billionaires.
Well, I think that the government is the rule makers. And I think we need to stand by and let that conversation continue on and let them come up with some reasonable accommodation. I mean, the issue's been raised. All of the governmental agencies are engaged. Lawsuits are in place. So, and it will, we're kind of bystanders until we see how that all plays out. And then we'll have to respond. However, we're basically told to respond by the EPA and the FAA. And the other comment I think you said that I think is important, it's always good to work together in a collaborative way. Always.
I agree.
So rather than entrench and everybody needs to take this hardcore position, this is it, it's my way or the highway, it's just not helpful for anybody. I mean, there's always some way to work together towards an end goal. So yeah, I'd like to see the rhetoric die down and the cooperation maybe go up a little bit. I think that would benefit the citizens as a whole. So, Rich, you have your hand up, sir.
Yeah, just two questions as to, or actually a statement. EPA recently reworded their bid on lead as opposed to implying that there is no safe level. They have said they have not determined a safe level. I know that's semantics, but that is something that should be brought up in the truth in advertising. As per the shooting range, there's undoubtedly over a ton of lead shot underneath the soil east of the localizer antenna and probably underneath a lot of the pavement over there. They were not required to dig that out. Their standard of the day was to cap and seal, and that's what happened during the airport setup. And then the third bit is, we could use an existing tank to put 94 UL in. We would have to, just to let everyone understand this, purge that tank completely and clean all the lead out of it, because if we're selling a 94 UL product, there are some Rotex type engines that cannot stand any amount of lead in them. And if we would mix existing fuel with an unleaded product, we'd have something we couldn't sell to a lot of people. So just be aware that it is not nowhere near as simple as it has been. The town seems to imply also that 40% at least of the aircraft that are based on that airport cannot use 94 UL, have got to use 100 octane fuel.
I think the minute that you changed over and you eliminated 100 low lead from the field, very shortly thereafter, you would have a lawsuit from the FAA. And it would be the same thing that Reed Hillville got. because we'd be broaching or breaching our assurances that we would provide service equally to all.
I agree, John.
I mean, in essence, we would be creating a new standard that there should be no 100 low lead, and we don't have that capability or authority to do that. So that's not even on the cards. Like I say, we have to wait and see how this plays out at Reed Hillview. And then, we need to stay on top of it, as Lisa said. And then based on that, we'll have to take appropriate action and keep our options open. So that's my thoughts on that. Any of the other commissioners, do you have any comments on the topic? Any questions about levels or any of the stuff that I just kind of summarized for you? Because I know the open meeting laws prohibits a lot of open information. So I wanted to make that available to you. Okay. It was important to talk about this because we need to talk about whether or not we add a tank, and that will be part of the BOA projects. And so with that, there's no questions. I'd like to move on to the last item, the Bureau of Aeronautics project update and discussions. Brian, if you could move ahead, please. Brian, are you there, Brian? Scroll the data up.
Yep, just give me 1 second.
Yeah, not a problem. Want to make sure you weren't at the water fountain getting a drink. Well, let me kind of set the stage for this. Between the time we talked about our option and we settled on the option 1028 reconstruction, that we had since then, or after then, we had a call with the BOA and BOA management about reconstruction versus rehabilitation. The BOA strongly felt it was in the best interest of the city and everyone for us to consider the rehabilitation over the reconstruction. The base of our airport is very, very solid. And it doesn't show any issues other than where underneath the road, we have a culvert underneath the runway, we have a culvert, and that culvert might need some remediation. If you roll to the bottom line on this, you can see the differences only cost us about $54,000 out of our budget. So it does save about $80,000. And we probably can get a lot more than the $2 million. I think we could probably come up with 2.5 or possibly 2.7 from government. So we can get pretty far there to complete the project. Also, the timeline of the project would be much shorter. And we've already closed the airport for a substantial period of time this year. And we don't want to do this again anytime in the near future for the sake of our commerce on the field. Now, I believe that we would get it will take 2 years to begin the rehab of the taxiway. And then maybe we would do the runway in a couple of more years after that. So we're actually talking about spreading this out over about a 4-year period. So I would like to make a motion that we change our strategy from the reconstruction to the rehabilitation based on the comments of the Bureau of Aeronautics. Do I hear a second anywhere? Anyone second the motion?
I'll second
ahead.
it for discussion, but I do have some questions.
Yeah, so we have a first and a second. Let's discuss. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just I need to understand what we're talking about here. So the match amount of $54,389, that would come out of the airport enterprise fund, correct?
That is
Where
correct.
does the $1,003,000 come from that
Okay.
makes up the difference?
Yeah, sure. So here, let's just kind of go through it a little bit. So we have available through our AIP, bipartisan infrastructure legislation, about 2 million. It could be closer to 2.5. It's kind of a moving number right now. So
Mhm.
that brings us to 1,087,783. Again, these are just, if you're dealing with government, it's constantly changing. Our match percentage for these projects are 5%. So 5% of the 1,087,783 is 54,389. The rest of it comes through the Bureau of Aeronautics. It comes through their infrastructure fund.
Okay. Okay, great, thanks. And then so the useful life is cut in half though, correct?
Yes, it is. But we're talking, they're not going to finish the other for 4. So we're talking 15 years from now before they have to revisit this. A lot can change in 15 years.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion to change our direction from reconstruction to rehabilitation. We have a first and a second. So I'd like to call a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Hi,
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so question to Mark and to Brian. Since the projects have already been approved, much like we did with the Caterpillar when we bought the snow removal equipment, did this need to go back to the Common Council, or since it's approved, did we just notify the Bureau of Aeronautics of our direction and we let them go forward? This
I
is-
can answer
Yeah.
that, Brian. So right now, we don't have any active petition for
Yes,
airport improvement aid for any projects at the airport. So
Yes.
that, in my view, would be the first step we'd have to take, is to petition to be eligible for those funds. And that petition process, as we've been saying for years, and it keeps being glossed over, I think, is not by this group. But we keep saying that involves a public hearing, and it does. It will be held anytime we do a petition, we have a public hearing.
okay,
So for any type of funding request. So that step needs to be taken before we can tap into any of those funds.
okay. Then does the motion need to be made that we just made need to be to the Common Council? Or not?
I think that would make sense. Yeah, you direct it towards the Common Council.
Okay.
How
so
does the motion read? I wasn't taking notes, so.
That the Airport Commission recommends approval of option 1A, which would be a change from the past meeting where the recommendation was 1B. So they're recommending approval of option 1A.
So maybe as part of that, endorsing the steps, I guess implied in that is an endorsement of the steps needed to proceed with that. Whether that's part of the motion or whether that's just understood, it doesn't matter to me,
I
I
mean,
guess.
the process is the process.
Right.
I would not assume anything is understood. I would,
Well.
yeah, or implied, I would be very clear what the motion to the council is asking.
And that's why I'm raising it,
Yeah.
Alder Janeiro. I just wanted to point out that, we have this petition process that in my view would be the next step.
Okay, so let's reconstruct the motion again, and then we'll vote on it so it's correct and replace it. So the motion would be that we would make a recommendation to the Common Council for the rehabilitation of the runway and taxiway for 1028. We would provide them at a cost of approximately $3 million. and that it go through the standard processes to petition the BOA for the project. Does that catch it all?
Funding assistance, yeah,
Okay,
either,
so
yes,
let-
something like that.
let's vote on it again. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye,
Wait, I'm sorry, just to go
Yep.
back, to the process, I believe that's a motion to reconsider, and I will second that motion to reconsider.
okay. All right, thank you.
Had you actually voted on the first motion?
Yeah, we did, actually.
Oh, okay, all right, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I'm not the
No,
parliamentary.
I just, Lisa's point is valid if you had voted. I just didn't know if you had
Yeah.
voted.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, Lisa. Keep me honest. That's hard. It's a very hard job sometimes. So all in favor of the replacement motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries and it goes on to the common council. I want to add another piece to it now. Where do we feel about the fuel tank and the related equipment? I kind of feel that first of all, we can't do as suggested and eliminate 100 low lead from the field and reuse the tank. We will be in a lawsuit with the FAA, and Rich has already talked about the operational issues that we would have with that.
You mean to switch to the 94?
Yes, to switch to the 94, absolutely. Go ahead.
Do you have a copy of what those assurances are? Like, I'm trying to find them
Yeah.
on the website for the
Yeah.
airport, and I can't find any of those.
Yes, we can get you a copy of them.
Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. Everybody should have a copy too. So I don't see that that's in the cards, if you will. I think it's a big risk factor for the city. We could add another tank. We know that the fuel is not going to be available tomorrow. Well, we could add the 94 would be available. But I'm always trying to weigh, $400,000 of an investment that we're gonna make obsolete in a year, potentially. Is that a good investment, or do you just wait for the replacement fuel to come along? And the replacement fuel, the G100UL, is fungible, which means you can add it on top of 100 low lead without any problem. So I'd like to have some thoughts and discussions on that. Where should we pursue it? I mean, I think economically it doesn't make sense. We need to sit back and wait for what plays out at Reed Hillview. Anybody?
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, whoever.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring up a couple things quickly. There are options, and we can do a pioneering bit. We don't have to go with the full 8,000 or 10,000 gallon tank, as I had suggested earlier. It's at this convention that I was at recently for aviation. I talked with Metco, our supplier of fuel tanks and the like. They had a line on a used 1,000-gallon tank that we might be able to get fairly reasonably and set up. I know we would be paying a premium for our deliveries, but we can go in conjunction with the other airports in the area and get a larger load and set this up at a considerably less of a cost. Now, this would not be a state project. We wouldn't be spending 5% money on it. On the other hand, we could probably get it set up in, I will go out on a limb and say in less than 6 months. The other option that was floated, which I think is something that we could do or look at, is lease and or purchase another fuel porter with a 1,000-gallon capacity or thereabouts, and then use that, fill that directly. Both of which, these are not necessarily fixed assets. You can sell the tank when you're done with it. If you don't need it, we could certainly sell the porter and or retire our porter and use the newer one, assuming it is a newer one, down the road. And the city could either own it or, again, sell it. Both of which would give us an option. I honestly I know there's a market for 94 UL. I don't think it's very great, to be honest.
So
And,
Rich, this operational here, on a monthly basis, we believe that there's 60% of the monthly fuel could go to 94 UL. So if there's 110,000 gallons, there's almost 10,000 gallons a month. And
Oh,
60% of that would be 6,000 gallons. How does 1,000 gallon transporter fill the bill?
Well, again, John, we've got 60% of the aircraft on the field that could do it. Of that 60%, most of them burn around 5 to 7 gallons an hour versus your multi-engine or a Cirrus or whatever else. So even though we have 60% on field, we would typically, we're not going to be selling. My guess is maybe if everyone switches over, we're going to have a 35% of the 100 low lead. Yes.
If I remember the calculations, I guess you're right. It was not 60% of the volume. It was 60% of the air.
But you're absolutely, you're absolutely correct, John. We'd be having to get fuel regularly. And if that is the case, then there would be a case for a larger tank. But what we have seen and heard from, and this is anecdotal, is places that do have the 94 UL, they're not moving it real quick. Most people would just as soon throw the 100 in there. So,
well, we have. As you're bringing up these ideas, my gears are rolling simultaneously. We have $30,000 committed by the city to spend on 94 UL solution. If the city would buy the truck, which then they could resell, and we could do it in a $30,000 envelope, it has zero effect on the airport operating fund. So, I mean, that might be something we can explore. So Lisa, you had your hand up first.
Yes, well, I was going to make sure that this was properly noticed, our discussion, and it is. I just reread the agenda to make sure that we didn't inadvertently go back to an agenda item that we'd already finished, and that could get us into trouble with open meeting. But I would say my preference all along has been not to add any more infrastructure that is a long-lived piece of infrastructure that is going to be helping the city or not help the city achieve its goals for sustainability. So I'm thrilled that the GAMI fuel is available, will be available a lot sooner than anybody was thinking. And my preference would be not to add another tank, even if most of the cost could be covered through the Airport Improvement Program and BOA.
Okay. And by the way, thank you for once again keeping me off of the weeds. I think what we'll do is we'll put that topic on the agenda for next month, and we'll do some research on costs, and then we can discuss, that option. Brian, you have your hand up.
Thanks. I just had a quick question on price for the pilot. Is the difference between the 94 and the leaded fuel? Is there a noticeable difference? Would that encourage unleaded adoption or no?
right now, the 94 UL is a little bit more expensive, or has been in the lake around the area, simply because of the volume that they had to purchase at. And fuel is very volatile at the moment, as you can imagine.
Right.
The current news of that next month they're going to drop 2 million or whatever it is, is not welcome. But again, I had put if there's no expense for the company, Maury Airplane Company, we can certainly match the, I've already committed actually to try matching or doing our best to match the UL price to the 100 octane. So there'd be no penalty dollar wise for purchasing it. And if that requires a a lesser profit margin and or possibly even a break even, we can make that work.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so to get back on track, we're talking about whether or not we should add to the petition. The first two items on this list, the additional fuel tank that would hold the 94 UL. And my motion would be that that we do not recommend to the Common Council the petitioning for an additional fuel tank and engineering for a separate a 94 UL tank at this time. Any discussion about that motion?
Hi, this is Dave. I guess it's more of a comment to the motion.
Sure.
What I'm really, what concerns me the most, and it, you know, if we're really, if one element is to try to work with our surrounding communities, you know, regarding this issue, then how do we, you know, how do we sell that idea? Because the surrounding communities simply want unleaded fuel at the airport, and for obvious reasons, you know, we can't swap fuel out. So then, you know, a third tank is, I guess, the solution in their view. And so I think whatever message we send to the Common Council is that, you know, we're chasing a, we're so on the edge of what's happening here in terms of a possible transition to unleaded fuel, that we're making, you know, decisions without really knowing what the future is. And I think that's what the outlining committees need to understand, is that, yes, it's a financial decision to say we're not going to put a third tank in because it's spending money. But also the other reason is, and maybe this is just in part of the discussion, is that we just don't know what the future holds. A third tank would be then an airport that would have two tanks that would ultimately someday both have 100 unleaded fuel. The industry might abandon 94 unleaded fuel. The cost of having to have multiple production lines for two different types of fuel, when every airplane out there can use 100 octane. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but all the airplanes can run 100 octane fuel. It's just that the 94 MOGAS is in place for the engines that are spec'd to run fuel without lead.
That is correct.
Yeah. So, I guess what it really leads to is the fact that I think for those of us, you know, that are in aviation and understand the mechanics behind what's going on out there, is that every engine can run a form of 100 octane fuel. Not every engine can run leaded 100 octane fuel. So I think what our neighbors in the surrounding community need to understand is that, you know, we're holding out for the 100 leaded fuel, not because we don't necessarily even want to spend money on a tank, but because this may inevitably be the future in every aspect of it.
Well, you make a good point. That's why the Reed Hillview thing is so important, to see how that plays out. Lisa, you had some comment?
Yeah, well, and I guess to Dave's point, it isn't even just about the saving of money. Honestly, I would rather spend that money in the next 2 or 3 years to accelerate, like to get us to the top of the line in terms of getting the 100 unleaded. You know, if we're going to spend the money, let's spend it in a way that accelerates our switch to 100 unleaded instead of making a third option available that still yeah, I just feel like all along I've been thinking, if it were a cost issue, wouldn't we rather spend the money, instead of on a new tank, wouldn't we rather subsidize the cost of the fuel? If that was the barrier, wouldn't we rather subsidize the cost of the fuel and save on the tank?
Yeah, it's still a logistics issue. I mean, you can't switch all the way over, so there's got to be some separate container that holds the 94 UL. And we don't have that container, so we have to come up with it. So Rich, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but again, from what AvFuel was talking about, there's a longer process than even though it is approved on an STC, the whole ramping up of the supply chain may take longer than we were hoping, because the complexity of it, then it has to be demand driven. The whole economics of it, he explored in greater detail than I can go into in this time frame, but he wasn't terribly optimistic. He said by 2030, we're going to have it. But any guess between now and between 2030 is just that, a guess, because the FAA basically put themselves on the timeline to say, we're going to have this by 2030. So we're going to have it. But again,
I don't think that takes into consideration if the EPA does come up with endangerment finding. I doubt they will, but assuming they did, they're going to push FAA's hand on this because they're the ones that gave the dispensation.
Mhm.
And the government as a whole potentially is going to have to pour some money into this.
Yeah.
Right? There could be some executive orders and some other thing. And if you print and push enough money into the system, things happen. So that could change the whole landscape. So Brian, you have your hand up. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the idea of having, I think spending the large amount of money and putting a new tank in the ground and that taking 6 months and then all the rest of it just as a stopgap. I don't know that I'm a fan of that, which I think is what we're voting on. But I think what Rich was saying of having even 1,000 gallons, that's 1,000 gallons less of leaded fuel that would be burned if we went with the more mobile option that could then be resold. I don't know what I think that sounds like what we're discussing next meeting, but I'm in favor of adding unleaded fuel to the airport, especially if we're looking at a 2030 timeframe for any real sizable volume. And I understand production and supply chain, and I get that. It's not like they can just switch it on tomorrow. But I think exploring a less expensive option, I like the idea of the 30,000 and things. So just wanted to say that.
We definitely, Brian, we'll get that on next month's agenda, and we'll do our homework between now and then. We'll try to put some numbers to that concept, so we can really take a deep dive into it. So the motion out there now is to not recommend to the Common Council the petitioning of the additional $10,000 94 UL tank and related engineering at this time. Is there any more discussion about that? Lisa, are you comfortable with the motion?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, since the council already is, the last action the council took on this was to authorize, I think, $30,000
Yes.
to be put towards this work. So, but it hasn't been spent, right? There's no work going on to spend it on. So I
Yes.
guess I'm wondering, if we are going to talk about this next month, do we want to just hold off? Is there a need to take action tonight? If the petition for what's showing on the screen, the option 1A, that's one thing. But if you're suggesting that, we should make the decision to remove our previous petitioning on the unloaded or the third tank, I guess that I'm just wondering, do we need to take action tonight? And if we don't, why not think about this next and talk about it next
Well,
time?
I don't see that the 10,000 tank is going to fly, period. I mean, the best case scenario based on our discussions right now, is the 1,000 gallon truck. So the petitioning of $400,000 to the BOA, I think we should be clear that we don't recommend that.
Okay, and just again, so I make sure I know what we're talking about, but we have already petitioned for that, correct? So now we're rescinding or,
It was on our,
Walking that
it was on our petition list, yes.
okay. All right, then that makes sense. And I'll second your motion.
Okay, Rich, you had your hand up?
I think it might be very useful to say that we'd like to continue to pursue a less expensive option to put 94 UL on the airport, because I don't want to be seen as simply abandoning the project when we aren't, but just saying that we've decided that there may be a quicker and less expensive option to go with a smaller tank and use the money that's been allocated toward that as opposed to this big project. I just think that it's the truth, and it would be a lot more politic. People would see that we are committed to trying to come up with a solution. Also, I'd emphasize it would be a lot quicker solution than going with this full project.
That's both cases are correct. I'm gonna defer to our common council members and our staff regarding the wording of the motion. Brian, Lisa, Mark, comments on the modification to make it contain all the ideas that we have here? I mean, we can have a replacement motion.
Yeah, I think this would just be a separate add-on motion to your previous one that you'd voted on earlier tonight, and I think I've got sufficient detail on what the intent of the commission was.
Can you read it to us?
That the airport commission would not recommend the addition of a separate 10,000 gallon fuel tank for unleaded fuel options at this time, but is willing to consider other lower cost options to encourage the use of unleaded fuel in the interim period.
You might add 94 UL to the unleaded fuel,
Sure.
because that's in the town's letter.
And I would change is willing to consider to is actively considering. And could you read it again, Brian?
That the airport commission would not recommend the addition of a separate 10,000 gallon fuel tank at this time. Instead, they recommend to the city council the addition of a lower cost Swift 94 UL tank to be installed when possible.
I think that's too granular. I think that's too specific. I thought we were just talking about pursuing
Option.
lower cost effective options.
Yeah, I would say that the 94 UL, we would we would not pursue the $10,000 gallon tank for 94 UL unleaded, which is the request of the township. Rather, we are pursuing other. We would like to pursue other less costly options at this time.
Timely.
Does that capture it? Lisa? Mark Opitz?
Well, I think it's the reference to less costly does go back to Dave's comment. It's making it sound like it's we're just trying to save money, and that's not the case.
Well, then we can just say other viable options.
Or timely, a quicker option.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, that would be good. Other
More timely options.
more timely options.
Okay, so the airport commission does not recommend pursuit of a 10,000 gallon fuel tank for Swift 94 unleaded fuel. Rather, they recommend pursuit of another viable and timely option for Swift 94 UL fuel at this time.
Yeah, instead of the another, just have an other. I think that captures it.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
so
So is that the subs, who's gonna substitute that? Either
That's-
Dave or Brian or Michelle? Because you and I are already on the hook for your one, unless you.
okay, so David, you'd like to make a motion to approve the substitute.
Yes, so I make a motion to approve the substitute option.
And Brian, you're next in line if you feel the same. Okay,
Yeah.
so Brian, okay, there we have to hear the auditory. Yes, so Brian
Yes.
approves.
Brian seconds.
Yeah, okay, so we have a first and a second on the substitute. All in favor of the substitute motion, please say aye. Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
pose same sign. Substitute motion passes. So that concludes everything I had on the list. So next meeting, I will prepare to have a discussion on these other options. And then we can take a look at what those options are and whether they fit into the various budgets. Because now we're talking about back in spending the town's money, the city's money. And so we need to make sure all of that interlocks between all parties and it fits together. So I will take it on myself to do the preparation. Is there anything else that we need to take care of and add to next to add to the next meeting that that's on your mind? Obviously, we can always add. Great. I apologize for getting here just at the end of the motion, so I'll be better, more responsive last time. I have too many balls in the air. I was getting my feet taped up to get rid of some of the swelling in my feet. So anyway, and you can see I have a scalp protruding.
Oh,
I'm getting thinner by the day. So I'm determined whether or not I have a perfect head or not. So anyway, does anyone care to make a motion adjournment at this time?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Second,
I'll second it.
Davis, second, a person a second. All those folks in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Oh, same side. Okay, we officially concluded the October Airport Commission. Thank
Great.
you.
Take
All right,
care, everyone.
thanks.